All right, folks, welcome back in. I am Jake Ellenbogen, and I'm happy to be here once again at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on a Wednesday talking Rams football. So today we're going to be talking about the draft. We'll be talking about the first round pick that the Rams currently have at pick 26. Before we dive into that, just want to remind you guys that you can follow me on all social media, including the Blitz Report app at JK Bogan. You can check out my YouTube channel, Jake Ellenbogen. I cover all sorts of Rams content. Been doing a lot of different draft profiles and draft scouting reports. I just finished up the Colston Loveland video. So by the time you see this, that'll probably be out. But let's talk about it because, I think right now with the Rams, they're one of the better teams, I think, on paper at least, going into the season. And they're one of the, top 8 teams, you could say, going into the season just based on what they did last year, in the postseason. And so I think pretty much everybody would agree, as far as the NFC right now, it's the Eagles and probably the Rams. They have a really good roster all the way top to bottom. And, I think the first thing that you think of in terms of that is when you have everything there, you're quick to be like, okay, well, now you have a luxury. You can do whatever you want. And that's true. Like the Rams could totally draft whoever they wanted at 26 overall. They could trade up. They could they could package the pick and do what they did in the past and do F them picks, trade for a player that's already established in the NFL. They are free to do that. However, I thought about this for a while, and I really don't see a better opportunity here for the Rams than to trade out of the first round. And maybe even not trade out of the first round, just trade out of this 26th overall pick. You finished outside of the NFC title game, which keeps you in the driver's seat here. You're 6 picks away from 32. Reminds you how close you are, but yet how far away you are. So I do think the best thing here for the Rams is to be cost effective. Now, not only will not drafting at 26 improve their cap because, you do have that cap hold and those picks are more money, but you could bring in another draft pick, trade back into the second round, bring in another draft pick that matters on day 2 in a deep draft, in a draft that people are saying that have been covering drafts for years are saying that your 20th pick is as good as the 60th pick in this draft. You're basically drafting the same tier of player. That's not a draft I want to have a first round pick in. That just devalues the first round, in my opinion. Now, looking at who is available potentially on the board for the Rams, it's hard to know, right? It's hard to really know how the board is. We have mock draft simulators. All those do is give us an idea, but all they're designed to do is be accurate. No one knows for sure until the draft happens where guys are on their boards. No one's flying up boards right now. No one's flying down boards right now. This has already been pre-decided. The NFL has a certain board in mind. Everyone will have different boards, but for the most part, they know where guys are going to go. They have intel on where certain players are likely to land. Whereas you and I, we're speaking from the standpoint of simulators, which simulators have gotten way better than they used to be. But be that as it may, it is not the end all be all. And again, a simulator is no different than simulating in your franchise mode in Madden, simulating the season. We get caught up in that too. People will be like, oh, I simulated the 2025 season and the Rams did this. Yeah, but a simulation is taking numbers, scrambling them up, and it gives you a different output each time. You don't simulate something and then have the same thing happen multiple times. The point being is that these mock draft simulators have an algorithm, and based on the numbers, based on the probability, they are banking on this, and this happening, and these certain players going to certain teams. And the variables that come with that are teams that have team needs, teams that aren't going to draft team needs, teams that care about positional flexibility, versatility, and value. And yeah, so some of the guys that are available at 26 might not be available. That's just the reality of it. Like you might have in your mock draft Jahdae Barron out of Texas. Personally, I think he goes top 15. He's a really, really good athlete, but you might have him available on your mock draft at 26. I don't believe he's going to be there at 26. I don't. I definitely don't. So think about this. You have, you're sitting there at 26, potentially some edge defenders have fallen down the board, potentially some wide receivers, potentially a quarterback. Why would you pick at 26 in this deep of a draft? And if you want to say it's not that deep, well, think about it. If it's not that deep, then I would want to make sure I have as many picks inside of day 2 as I can. The Rams could come away with another day 2 pick. They could have 4 of them if they made this trade. Now, understandably so, if they traded out at 26, they took on the 39th pick. It's not as good as the 26th, and so they gained an extra third rounder. But that's kind of the point. See, the 5th-year option used to matter. To me, it still matters to a degree. But the bottom line is if you have a player that's really just absolutely killing it, you draft in the first round, do you really think they're going to be okay with you just, yeah, you have the 5th-year option? No, they're going to want to get paid. Do you think Jared Verse ever sees that 5th-year option? That's my point. So the benefit of drafting a player in the first round is no longer there unless it's a quarterback. You can go back and look at that 5th-year option in the first round. And you're like, okay, quarterback makes sense. I might not even start the guy until year 5. That's fair. But the way these guys are paying now, and of course, are getting paid now, and of course now we're starting to see the escalator in terms of performance based pay for rookies, whether you're drafted in the 5th round or not. It's you're paying for these guys, so you really have to hit home on who you're drafting. And I think just kind of looking at this draft in a nutshell, this feels like the type of draft that I want a lot of picks on day 2. I want picks in the 2nd round. I want picks in the 3rd round. I don't see as many guys being gems like in the past in the 6th or 7th. But when I say has a lot of depth, I'm saying in that day 2 area, I think that might be the most valuable area of the entire draft. I find myself when I'm picking at 26 with a mock draft simulator in front of me, I find myself reaching on players I like. Will that happen? I don't know. But I find myself reaching on Jaden Higgins, who has a ADP of around top 50. And I end up, if I have to stay at 26, I'm taking him. Jack Besh from TCU, Alika Yominor from Stanford. These are guys that I'm reaching on based on the board. But it's like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, I like all these wide receivers. I like some of the tight ends who will likely be there on day 2. I like the linebackers. Why am I rushing to get a guy at 26? The last one I did, I have it right in front of me. The last one I did before I even made a pick, the guys there were James Pierce Jr., the edge defender from Tennessee, who wouldn't start. Maybe you could call him insurance for Byron Young. He could be insurance for Michael Hoyt and replace Michael Hoyt in the Cheetah package, but he's not a need. Is he the best player available? Maybe. Kelvin Banks Jr. played at Texas. Can he play right tackle? I don't know. Would he start? Nope. Interesting. Omarion Hampton. Drafting a running back at 26. Is that the best way to utilize that draft pick? It's not to say that player wouldn't succeed. It's not to say that that's not a good player. But as far as positional value, I don't know how much sense it makes to draft a running back at 26 when you already have Kyren Williams. I don't know how much sense it makes to take a tackle when you don't have a starting option available for said tackle. I don't know how much sense it makes to take an edge defender when you already have two starting edge defenders. I don't know how much sense it makes to draft Colston Loveland, who is really just a receiving threat, another receiver at 26th when he's not a great blocker, can't break tackles, and isn't good in the contested catch area. A tight end that's not good in contested catch opportunities, doesn't break tackles, and can't block. Don't know if I'm drafting him at 26. So then you have Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, a guy who can play all five positions. Where's he going to play? See what I'm saying? So it's not to say that I'm against drafting best player available. It's not to say that I'm for drafting for need, but it is to say that none of these guys are pressing enough in either category, best player available or need. None of them are pressing enough for me where I'm sitting there saying, I need this guy. I need to draft him right now. I can't trade down. I can't risk losing him. There's not one player here that I'm sitting here saying I can't risk losing. The closest thing to that player is a wide receiver, in my opinion. It is Jaden Higgins or Jack Besh for me. That's what I keep thinking. And I'm sitting here thinking, I want a receiver. And I know the Rams want another receiver. Probably the last receiver that they need, really. They'll fill up the rest with college free agents. They'll fill up the rest with, Xavier Smith is still on the roster, special teamers. But think about it. If you add Jaden Higgins or Jack Besh, you already have Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington. You got Xavier Smith as your return man. You really only need one more. But the argument for getting a high-quality receiver here, and if you were to reach on a Higgins, is because when you get into a draft like this, again, the board isn't just based on your draft simulator. Jaden Higgins, I would be shocked if he doesn't go earlier than 50. But I would not be shocked in the slightest if he ends up off the board to Buffalo at 30, Kansas City at 31, Philly at 32. This is a really, really talented player. And I just don't necessarily think that, it's not a guarantee he's going to fall in the second round. But, so why would I trade out? Well, that's the thing. I'm talking about drafting Higgins at 26 if I stay. But to me, the more valuable thing is to recoup that pick you traded away last year to move up and get Braden Fisk. And I think the Rams had a feeling they'd be a really good football team this year. They had a feeling they'd be picking in the mid to late 20s, maybe even 30s. And so they felt like that was an opportunity to trade down. Also, they planned this stuff ahead. Would you have been that open to trade away a second round pick next year if you knew the draft was going to be amazing? It's not an amazing draft. It's got some great positional value. It's got great running backs. Again, why I wouldn't draft a running back in the first round. It's got really good top-heavy linebackers, in my opinion. It's got some wide receivers that are being slept on and a little bit of everything. They can do a little bit of everything. It's got some decent tight ends, top-heavy offensive tackles, right? Really good in the trenches, interior defensive linemen. And definitely some athletic safeties. It's got a lot. It doesn't have a great deal of quarterback, that I feel really good about. I think the Rams need to trade down. I think they need to recoup another pick in that day 2 range, and I think that's where they can get their money. And let's say they do. What would a trade down look like? What would a trade down look like? So, in order to understand that, you would have to look at a trade value chart. So, a trade value chart is based on Jimmy Johnson's classic valuation model. Okay, I don't actually think Jimmy Johnson created it. I think one of his assistants created it. It was something for him to look. And basically, the entire point of the trade value chart, it's not just this made up thing with numbers and a cool little algorithm. It is actually based on the history of trading. Like, what do teams give up? What does it look like? So the Rams pick has 700 points, according to this trade value chart. Okay. Hear me out. 26th overall selection has 700 points assigned to it. So if they were to trade down, let's say to pick 38 with New England, that's a 520 point pick. So the Rams in this scenario would net 180 points. So if they were to net 180 points, that puts them in position where New England would have to give up another pick. Does New England have another pick to give up? Probably not. They have the 69th pick. That's a 245 point pick. So more than the 180, right? Decent amount more than 180. Because if you're looking at it, 180, you add 20, it's 200 right there. Then 45, so that'd be 65. So the Rams would probably have to move a pick as well. So that's how that can happen, right? So that gets a little weird. But that's just New England. Say you move down a little bit, okay? The New York Jets, that's 480. So 480, 700, that's 220. The Jets have the 73rd overall pick in round 3. It's about 225. Doesn't have to be deadly accurate. You just have to be in the ballpark for these trade, the draft value. And again, it's not the end all be all. There will be trades made that don't actually coincide exactly with the trade value chart, but this is an idea of what you're looking at. What you're looking at is that the Rams have the ability to trade out at 26, move down to 42 with the Jets, and pick up the 73rd overall pick. So if they do something like that, and keep in mind, that's just them moving their pick, getting another pick, and swapping with the Jets. That's not them moving around any 7th or 6th or anything like that. So if they were to do that, no strings attached, 26, move down to 42. Okay. That right there, 16 pick drop to get you another third rounder. Is it worth it? I think it is. I do. I definitely think it is. But you know what else I think could be worth it? One of those picks, because obviously it's nice to have a 73rd overall pick. You're pretty early on in the third round. You don't have your next pick after you pick 26, and this is why I am all for trading down, is 90th. You don't have a second round pick. That's going to be a long wait. It's 90th. And then you have 101. So you got 90th, 101, and 127 on day 3. But there's a lot of, you're going to see a lot of guys that you like coming off the board left and right because you don't have that in there. So I do think this is the best course of action for the Rams. You're sitting there at 26. You trade down. And let's see if there is a team that you could trade with that has a late round 3 pick that could move you up more in the second round. So Cleveland does not. Oh, Cleveland does. So this might be an option too. You trade down to 33. First pick in the second round, 580. Okay. This is a 120 point difference. Cleveland has the 94th pick in the third round. So that 94th pick is 124 points, puts you about the same. So the Rams could theoretically get the 33rd pick, hold on to it, wait until the draft starts for that day. If a quarterback falls or a player fell, you got teams calling. They could trade down again. So not only did they add another pick on day 2, but in addition to that, they could add more. If they didn't feel like they were attached to anybody, they could add another pick. How far would they have to trade to likely get another third rounder based on this, this evaluation? They would probably have to go all the way down to, I would say, Detroit. Nope, not Detroit. I would probably say they'd have to go down to San Francisco, maybe. If they trade with San Francisco, they gave San Francisco the 33rd overall pick. and the Rams traded down with San Francisco to 43rd. That's 10 spots. Still haven't made their pick yet. San Francisco trade value chart, give them the 100th overall pick. Now the Rams are picking, if you're keeping track of this, they would make their first pick at 43 overall. Then they would make, because we trade down with Cleveland in this scenario. They would make then they would make their pick at 90. They would make their pick at 101. They would make their pick at 94 and 100. So this, to me, if there was any draft to have that many picks in the third round, it's this draft. I do think the second round, definitely you're going to want to have some more beef there, but you do get at least one of those guys at pick 43. That might be a decent idea. But what does that look like? Real quick. What does that look like? So if you do that, let's just say right now, we're going to trade down with the Browns. So trading down with the Browns, you do that, and you get the 94th overall pick. Okay. So in doing this, you now pick at 33. So based on this, and then you trade down with the Niners. Now, I'm not saying the Niners would do it, although the Niners have done it before with the Rams. They've absolutely done it before with the Rams. I mean, don't forget they traded up to get Trey Sermon with the Rams. So, Niners have the 75th overall pick in the third round. That is a little too rich because they're only dropping 10. So, they keep the 75th and they give up the 100th. So now the Rams are sitting here. They're going to be picking at 43. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like. And they also will be picking at 90, 94, 100, and 101. And you could trade down again if you didn't like anybody. But let's just say they don't do that. So at pick 43, at pick 43, Jaden Higgins is somehow still here. But so is Demetrius Knight Jr. What I could see the Rams doing is drafting Demetrius Knight Jr. So now you have a stud at linebacker, an absolute stud at linebacker. Okay? Just to explain. The next pick that you make, you are going to be picking late, day 2. You're going to be picking late day 2. So 90th overall, you're sitting there. And what I have here on the screen is that I have Trey Harris. So you go out, you add Trey Harris, a guy that can be a true X receiver and a productive player at Ole Miss, big-bodied receiver. So you get your receiver, you get your linebacker. Then at pick 94, say, I like, out of these guys right now, say I like Jonah Savalinia. I probably butchered that name. The tackle from Arizona. I see him as a potential to be the right tackle of the future behind Havenstein. Well, there you go. Now I just added that. And then at pick 100 and 101, I got back-to-back picks. Say I like Brashard Smith from SMU, receiving back. Can kind of, change a little bit of the offense. And then I get my tight end and Harold Fannin Jr. at 101, and that wraps that up. So on day 2, after trading down twice, I gave the Rams a linebacker of the future. I gave the Rams Trey Harris, who's an X of the future. I gave them a right tackle of the future behind Rob Havenstein. I gave them a running back that could play right away. He's the best receiving back in the draft because he's a former receiver, runs a full route tree, and he's a 4.3 speed guy. And I gave him Harold Fannin Jr., who fits the archetype of what they've looked for at that tight end position. Undersized, but guys that can, make guys miss in space. Very similar to a Gerald Everett, very similar to a Jordan Reed. And there you go. And now you've added 5 players for the future. And I'm not saying these are the 5 at 100% draft. This is just very quick, but just to explain, you could add 5 players on day 2 in a beefy and depth-filled early part of the draft, or you could pick a guy at 26, not pick until 90, and pick 3 guys total. That's what I'm saying. Is Loveland, think about this. To wrap this up, think about this. Is Colston Loveland worth giving up Demetrius Knight, um, Trey Harris, Brashard Smith? I mean, that's how I would look at it. Harold Fannin, like, is he worth giving up all those guys? Would you rather have him or would you rather have, because normally it's quality over quantity, but in this case, there's a quantity of quality in this draft. Since the Rams do not pick until 90th overall after their 26th pick, I think it's a no-brainer to trade out. Unless somebody crazy falls in their lap like a Tyler Warren, I expect that the Rams are going to trade out. But that's it. Appreciate you guys watching. As always, special shout out to Bleacher Report for having me. I'll see you guys next time. Later, folks.